It's about bringing the gardener's know-how into the kitchen and the cook's know-how into the garden. As we know, what gardeners want, as gardeners, what we want is long, straight beans. The longer, the better. As cooks, what we want is them young and tender. So what we're trying to do in these webinars is literally the crossover. And I know Daphne feels the same, but for the both of us, it has entirely shaped how we view, eat, enjoy, and cook food. For me personally, as an amateur cook, it is the one thing that has given me confidence to use my own judgment. And what I think it's fair to say, what we both want to do is to inspire as many people as we can just to feel the same. It's a real it's a really precious relationship. It's a very, very special relationship and really worthwhile cultivating. We've got a lot to cover, and if you see me kind of looking down, that's because I have to have notes because I'm not clever enough to remember it all. And not only that, I'll go off piste and you'll all be here this evening, which you would not thank me for. So it will be a bit of a canter, and what we're going to do is to divide it into two halves. So we will start in the virtual garden and we will then move into the virtual kitchen. We're each also going to bring slightly different perspectives to this, so we may meander a bit. It's not going to be one straight line, but then neither is nature, so that's fine. I'm going to kick off with a general overview of fresh green beans and concentrate on the harvesting and the storing. Daphne will then take over. She will share her perspective with you, deal with the nutritional aspects of fresh green beans, and then lead us to the seeds that green beans develop. In the second half, in the cooking, we're then going to come back to me. I'm going to deal primarily with what goes with what. I'll then pass you over to Daphne, who is going to, again, bring a slightly different perspective to all of this, what happens in the kitchen. And then we will end up where all green beans start, which is seeds, otherwise known as dried beans. And I'm really pleased that Daphne is doing that, because for me, next to asparagus, fresh dried beans are the ultimate luxury crop. And interestingly, yesterday, can you see this? Well, it says Suma, organic canned from fresh borlotti beans. So I know that in London delis and in Italy, they are indeed considered a luxury. And I would encourage everybody to grow some beans just so they can experience their own fresh dried beans. Right, let's get cracking. Now, as all of us who grow green beans know, there's actually not a lot to know about them, which in a funny kind of way is quite refreshing, because it basically depends on whether they're tender or whether they're tough, or conversely how tough their skins are, and that kind of it gives you your travel of direction in terms of how to cook them in the kitchen. They are coming into their own now. They're unique because apart from the really tiddly things, which I don't have an example of because I'm too mean to pick one because I don't have that many, you can literally eat them at every stage of their development. And that's kind of quite unique in a way. And what it means in the kitchen, of course, is match their tenderness to the dish that you're going to cook with them. I've got here a selection of beans which have mainly been culled from my neighbours. So these are French beans, which we know, characterised by a nice roundness. I'm growing these the purple podded French beans, if you know them, if you grow them, you probably, I don't know, yeah, you can just about. So if you watch them, they start green, go purple, and then when you cook them, they go back green again. The second category of beans that most of us grow are the flat beans, what's known as the flat beans. These are actually closer. They're a relative of runner beans and not French beans. And I thought this was quite interesting. I bought these at my local farm shop on Sunday. They're already a wee bit floppy. I picked these this morning, another variety of flat beans. I picked these this morning from my neighbour's garden. Then we have the classic runner beans. That's one variety which actually has got a furrier skin, and this is your classic enorma, which has got quite a smooth, shiny skin. Those are the three broad categories of beans that we all grow. Now, one of the reasons why I wanted to do climbing beans, kick off with climbing beans, is because it's a wonderful illustration of the best tools that we have at our disposal, namely your eyes, your ears, your nose, and your mouth. The more, and the feel, the more we can all use our senses, the better we will be as both cooks and gardeners. So, and if we take climbing beans if we take green beans as an example, if you watch them grow, you can actually then begin to judge when they are likely to be in their prime. And you can only really do this from a number of things. One is you watch them. Secondly, as we all know, the classic test is the snap test. So you can hear that. The other classic test is putting your thumb in. If your thumbnail will go in easily, and I mean easily, unlike my monster bean here, because this is already well past its best. You know, you can feel with your thumb that is going to be a bit tough, whereas this one you can feel that's lovely. I mean, it just is. Don't use your nose quite so much with beans, but absolutely use your taste. In fact, I think if there's one golden tip I would pass over to everybody, it is to get into the habit of tasting your vegetables raw. If you never tasted beans raw, how would you ever find out that runner beans are totally delicious raw? They are the sweetest, the most succulent, and the crunchiest of the family of beans. French beans can be good, depends if you get them à point. The flat beans here, they're milder and softer. And for me, it's getting into the habit of tasting your stuff as it grows and always tasting it raw. If you taste your beetroot raw, for example, that will immediately tell you whether it's sweet, so therefore you might want to grate it. Or if it's really strong and earthy, then you're going to turn it into a soup. It's my golden rule. And I do urge you to kind of get into the habit of that. Next on my list is all of what I've been talking about so far will really help you to work out or get the experience of when your crop is in its prime. And the other thing I want to say, I don't know whether we only have kitchen gardeners here tonight, but everything we're going to discuss this evening actually applies also to understanding more about your vegetables if you don't grow them. You might have a box scheme, you might go to a farmer's market, but the more we develop this kind of deeper relationship with veggies, the more it will help us enjoy them. So this is not at all. Generally speaking, as most of us know, you pick a crop when it's in its prime, and for most crops, including beans, this doesn't last long. And it's the second rule is once it shows sign of age, then to pick it and store it. beans are slightly more complicated. Another reason why I wanted to do beans first off. Firstly, because as we've discussed, you can eat them at any stage. But secondly, if as we know, it really, they start to set seed almost immediately. You probably can't see it, but even in this one here, this is a really young runner bean, but already what it most wants to do in life is to get that seed grown. So for runner beans, resist the urge to do this, which very few of us can resist, by the way, but do resist that. Pick them when they're young. And the other reason is the more you pick, the more you will get. And this is because if you don't pick them, then the flowers will stop growing and therefore you don't have any more beans. Time of day. There is another general rule, which all the commercial growers follow, is that you pick your crops early in the day before the sun gets to them, and you pick them when they're dry. And what you do is get what they call the field heat out of your crops as soon as possible. i.e. you pick them, you either keep them somewhere cool, if you're going to eat them later on in the day, or you pop them in the fridge, because if there's one thing about all beans is they really do keep well. They keep well for about a week. Keep them in a sealed container or a biodegradable plastic bag. I like to put a couple of holes in so they can breathe. That said, never ever, never ever let go of rushing out in the garden just before you're going to eat your beans and picking them then. So that's the theory. It is good sense, but when you grow your stuff, the ultimate luxury and the ultimate feel-good feeling is to go out in the garden, pick and eat. And I think that's a kind of good time now to bring Daphne in, if you're ready, Daphne. Have we lost Daphne?
I'm just slow off the mark. You've got me, I'm just slow.
Well, it makes up for me because I'm double quick.
Yeah, I'm much slower than you, Lynda. Hello, everyone. I'm going to do a little meandering before I look at the nutritional value of beans, because I see the world through the lens of food, and I'm sure you all have a wider variety of lenses than I, but you can definitely recount your life's journey through food. And one of my earliest recollections happens to be runner beans. Every year, my father tended a row in the garden of runner beans. And every year, as the schools broke up, the family, which was my parents, me and 3 brothers, piled into the car and went to a self-catering cottage in Cornwall. On the return journey, my father was focused on returning to his much loved garden and the beans. There was no stopping for refreshments, no stopping for a pee. And it was quite a long journey, actually. I mean, in those days, it must have taken a good 4 hours. On our return, he would go straight out into the garden and pick the beans, by which time I imagine there were quite a lot. And we would each have a pile of beans for supper, which my mother cut incredibly finely by hand, lightly cooked, and popped a poached egg on top. It's a really good memory. And if I close my eyes, all these years later, I can actually taste those beans. And I'm sure you've all got stories like that, that evoke food. So beans have got a slightly treasured place in my life. I'm going to share a little bit about the nutritional value of beans. And as I thought about this afternoon, I noticed that the key nutrients in runner beans and their endless relatives, because there's quite a large family, was nutrients that support mental health and well-being. And I thought that was very pertinent for the times that we're living in. So the first one that it's the fresh green beans are high in is vitamin K. In plants, you get vitamin K1, and vitamin K2 comes from foods of animal origins. So vitamin K1 is important for, obviously, for blood clotting and bone health. The only way you really absorb vitamin K is by including some fat. It's a fat-soluble vitamin, you need some fat. But if you eat enough K from plant sources, and if you encourage the way it is absorbed by using some fat, the body can convert it into vitamin K2. And it's vitamin K2 which is important for brain health. And actually they're looking at it to limit the neuronal damage that is associated with Alzheimer's. Vitamin C is again very high in fresh green beans, and that I think is a brain food as well. It's a potent antioxidant and always thought of as a stress busting nutrient, but what it's needed for, specifically in relation to the brain, is to convert dopamine to serotonin, which regulates your mood. The next one is the B complex. I think it's got B1, B2, B6, but specifically it's high in folate. Now, all the B vitamins work together to extract our energy from food, but they all do a little individual task as well. And the key thing about folate is it's used to, well, folate is very low in people that suffer from depression. So it's thought of as being beneficial for people with depression. The beans are high in phytonutrients. Phytonutrients are the, the antioxidants, anti-inflammatory, and are helpful for to stop free radical damage. And actually, the brain needs as much support as possible against free radical damage. And then it's got, they've got fiber. They're high in fiber, so that's good for gut health. And if we're talking about something being good for gut health, that's automatically good for brain health because of the gut-brain axis. And finally, it's got the other high nutrient in beans is silicon. And actually, I don't know a specific reason why silicon's good for the brain, but it is good for your bones. And actually, if you've got strong, healthy bones, you wouldn't get depressed. So I thought I could weave that in somewhere. So they are all incredibly beneficial for brain health as well as general well-being as well. They are nutrient packed. Of course, the quality and quantity will depend on elements, some out of your control, like the weather, but also the soil you grow them in, and the size you pick them, as Lynda was talking, is going to affect the nutritional value of each bean, and of course how you cook them. So I'm going to come back to relationship with soil and the relationship beans have with other plants after Lynda shares some ideas with you how to prepare these nutritious gems.
Thank you, Daphne. It's kind of, I was going to say it's turning into a little and large, except we're both little as it happens. Well, I didn't invite anybody look at a green and think I didn't think it was boring to begin with. You know, I didn't know all of that lot. Now it's given me even more excuse to go and eat more of them, because I do love them. I thought that was fascinating. Thank you, Daphne. And my brain will definitely thank you. Okay, let's kind of canter into the kitchen. And for me, you know, it's the general comments which is what I always want to try and give out to people. And the first is, if you really want your veggies to shine in the kitchen, keep it simple. Our role in the kitchen is to preserve all that lovely flavour, health and vitality. Daphne and I know she does. We spend most of our time eating our vegetables plain, with, as it happens, with beans, with a pile of fat on top. I can eat bowlful after bowlful after bowlful like that. And Daphne was talking about her big bowl of French beans, thinly sliced, runner beans thinly sliced with a poached egg. At the moment, I am living on runner beans, potatoes and fried egg. That's my treat. And I have that regularly at the moment, 3 times a week. You know, have permission. We hear a lot about plant-based diets now, and that's fine. But I do get slightly concerned because the recipes to me seem ridiculously complicated. Your veg cooking should always be simple. I don't think you'll ever get a recipe from either myself or Daphne. It will generally might have 2 or 3 ingredients. It is probably never ever going to have more than 6. But particularly for your homegrown, for when they're fresh. Once you've learned to recognize that kind of quality of health shines through. So A, keep it simple. B, let the season guide you. There is an unfailing equation. Everything that grows in the garden works with each other. It just does. And if you step back and think about it, if you think about certainly all the classic Italian recipes, they will put ingredients which are in season together. So it's another reason why you never really need to go towards your cookbook. Once you begin to understand this, life gets incredibly simpler, which leads you back to keep it simple anyway. The third thing I do want to really express strongly, it is your taste that matters most. I'm going to tell you that I think French beans and aioli really go well together. They do. They're great partnership. But if you don't like aioli, there is not a lot of point in putting them together. And for me, the whole thing about the cook's garden approach, what I term the cook's garden approach, is recipes are a guide, but they don't help you to do that, because what we're actually in the business of is matching what we like to what the veg likes. It's a real partnership. And once you go on this path, I promise you, your cooking will change radically. If up to now you have felt, because there is a common perception out there, particularly with our traditional culture, that vegetables are boring and therefore you've got to do a lot to them. The absolute opposite is true. So if we have a quick canter through, I'm just going to go through what works for me and hope that you pick up a few ideas. Now, we do know that all green beans are amenable. They go with most foods. They're very, very kind of adapting like that. So they go with other veg, they go with meat, they go with fish, cooked and chopped into bite-sized lengths. Another thing I'm really keen on is the way you slice a vegetable really matters in terms of its taste. So be mindful of that. There is no point putting a great big long runner bean in a salad. If you cut it on the diagonal, it will look better, but it will taste better because it will taste better because it's better in your mouth. It's easier to eat. And that is important. I never quite understand why people just randomly chop an onion. You should always put the way, and it's absolutely the same with French beans, I think. Well, with all beans. If you do cook them and chop them, they marry well with all kinds of salads, be it rice salads, pasta salads, grain salads, green salads. It's really easy to eat a lot of them as nature intended. And now I know why instinctively I douse them in butter, olive oil, coconut oil, pestos, flavored butters, or mayonnaise. Now that kind of comes instinctive to me, but now we understand why. So thank you, Daphne. And never worry about the amount you put on. If you use good quality fat, never worry about the amount you eat. It might be fashionable, but I actually don't think that French beans, actually that any beans taste good. If you're going to cook them, I don't think they work al dente. If you're going to cook your beans, cook them until they are just soft. That's pretty easy. You just use the point of a sharp knife. I personally, we could discuss the virtues of steaming and this, that, and the othering. I basically cook all beans in the same way. I have a shallow layer in a pan with a minimum bit of water. I slap the lid on, I boil them hard. And it's never more than 2-3 minutes. That's the way I cook beans. There is an exception, actually. Thinly sliced runner beans and the flat beans in stir fries. And my new discovery is what I'm dubbing hot salad. So what I'm doing at the moment, and I've just had some now, is slicing flat beans on the diagonal, because then they cook faster and they look nice too. And then just tossing them in hot coconut oil. It's about kind of 30 seconds, 45 seconds till they change color. Use your eyes. Sprinkle with salt, and that's it. So it's like hot raw, and it's really delicious. I absolutely recommend it. That's my new runner flat bean salad. I generally find that the runners and the flat beans, if they're tender, I just kind of eat them plain or stir fries. I think you can do more with French beans, speaking personally. Now, beans will go well with herbs, but for me, I actually find that they go better with seeds and nuts. So the French bean salad that I have been doing literally ever since I started cooking, and it has appeared in every cookbook I've ever written because I've never done anything else, basically, is you toast some sesame seeds, walnuts, or hazelnuts, not all three, one of those, toast them in a dry pan. If you're cancelling perfection, you would rub off the skins, but that's kind of doesn't always happen. You then chop them very coarsely, moisten with enough olive oil to make a kind of thin paste, season however you want to. You actually do need salt when you use fat. Generally speaking, I don't salt my vegetables, by the way, because I like to taste their sweetness. And you then just spoon that over cooked French beans, and that would be my go-to French salad. French beans. The other thing I really like is that Middle Eastern spice called daka, which again is based on sesame seeds with ground cumin and coriander. My all-time favorite has to be preserved lemon. If any of you, sometime or other, I'll send you all a recipe for preserved lemon, because it's the simplest thing in the world. But you get your preserved lemon, you take off all the pith, and then you cut the skin into tiny, 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 tiny pieces, and you just sprinkle that over your French beans. And it really points up the flavour, because lemons go well with French beans as well. In terms of their friends, Nigel Slater's got this lovely term. He calls what goes with what their friends, and it's a great expression, I think. So my friends for French beans are potatoes and eggs, but you already know that, and thankfully Daphne agrees. Beetroot, tuna, fresh or tinned tuna, good with chicken, hard-boiled eggs, lettuce. A base of lettuce leaves with some French beans and a few other flavorings is lovely. Oh, and try some crisp croutons with that as well. So you've got this contrast between crisp, soft, cooked and raw. That works really well as well. If you're a fan of vinaigrette, I'm not particularly, but if you are, then try them with a mustard vinaigrette. That is kind of what I do with green tender beans. If you have older beans, I actually only ever do one of two things. I use them for dishes where it's fine to cook them for a long time. That is minestrone type soups, which basically is whatever's in the garden, you put it in a pat, you add tomatoes. So you need to think they're natural partners, they're natural Mediterranean partners. And that always works well. And the other dish I do is a kind of Greek bean stew, which is, again, everything which is in season at the same time. You have a heavy pan, you pile in a lot of chopped beans, green beans. You then pile in a lot of fresh, ripe, chopped tomatoes, a finely sliced onion, some garlic, a lot of finely chopped parsley, douse with olive oil, good squirt of tomato puree, a pinch of sugar, stir, lid on, and let it cook very gently for about 40 to 50 minutes. It absolutely transforms the taste. It really does. Stir them from time to time. I like it tepid, actually, as a salad, but you can eat it hot as well. And the reason why I wanted to share that one with you is that I really can't recommend freezing beans. I can't actually recommend freezing any veg apart from spinach or broad beans. I don't really, we will talk about gluts and freezing another time perhaps, but this is one dish that will freeze well. So if you have got more beans than you know what to do with, and they are tougher than you would ideally like, then do try that dish, because fingers crossed you'll enjoy it. And now I'm going to pass you back to Daphne. I think I've lost the thread now, but I think we go back to you, Daphne. Yes, Daphne and three.
I'm going to unmute. I've got the technology off pat now. Jessica, could I have my first image, please? So I was going to look at the three sisters. So the three sisters come from the Iroquois tradition, and it's pumpkin, corn, and bean. And Robin Wall Kimmerer, in her absolutely exquisite book, Braiding Sweetgrass, calls the three sisters the genius of indigenous agriculture. And it is absolutely genius. So you have, this is mine growing at the moment, and you have the tall, straight corn, which provides support for the slender weaving stem of beans. And then you have the vast leaves of the pumpkins that smother the ground, keep the moisture in, and stop unwanted plants growing. It's a story of reciprocity. I can never say that word, reciprocity. And it's a story of cooperation, not competition. Can I have the second one? Here they are all growing in the way I described. And it's amazing because the three plants share the light, they share the water, they share the soil. But the sharing doesn't stop there, because the nodules on the roots of the bean exist because of a relationship between the bean and bacterium. bean provides the home for the bacterium, and as you all well know, the bacterium provides the nitrogen. So again, it is a story of mutual benefit. It's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. It's a system that gets an extraordinary amount from just one small plot of land. And it does something that's really important to me. It provides an abundance of food for the winter. Corn, pumpkins, and beans, which gets me very neatly onto drying beans. So actually, of course, when you're drying the bean, you're drying the seed, and the energy of that seed is completely different now to the energy of the beautiful green bean that Lynda was showing you. So actually, to dry beans, you might end up with a few big beans that you could dry, but I think it's worth actually growing 2 or 3 just for the ones that you're going to dry, because they take quite a few months to mature. And you know when and if you keep picking them, you're never going to get there. So if you, you'll know when they're ready, because the pod will swell. And if I have the next image, Jess, the pod will swell, as you can see on the left-hand side, and they turn a pale straw colour, and slowly they'll go drier and drier and rattle. I'll show you a couple in a minute. In the middle of that is my Hungarian beans, which I've had for many years, and actually their heritage goes back to Budapest about 30 years ago, and they are absolutely delicious dried beans. You can pick the dried pods as they appear and take them inside to dry completely. If you want to dry the whole plant, you can lift the plant, but make sure you leave the valuable roots in the soil because of the nitrogen. And obviously all this depends a bit on your climate. So actually, if you live in a warm, dry climate, you can leave your bean pods to dry on the plant. Actually, if you live in a slightly damper climate, it's going to make sense to take them in and hang them up inside to dry. Whatever method you choose, you have got to harvest them before the frost comes. So you can bring them in and you can do the finished drying just on a windowsill, and then you're going to take them out of their pods, and I always leave them out of their pods for a little bit longer to make sure there's absolutely no moisture left at all in them, and then you pop them in jars and save them either in jars or a paper bag. And you get a huge number of beans. So these beans, as I say, as a seed, is completely different nutrition from the green bean that we were looking at earlier. So obviously, with a seed, you have the potential for new life. So that seed is completely packed full of the nutrition to support that new life. So it is much higher in protein, for example. It has vitamins and minerals, and it has a greater variety of fibre. So it's going to have soluble fibre, it's going to have fibre that isn't soluble, and it's also going to have a resistant starch fibre. And they all are hugely beneficial to the gut bacteria. So providing food for the gut bacteria, the soluble fibre does, and that actually provides energy as a byproduct. And that energy can then be fed specifically to the brain. So Dietary fiber has a whole range of benefits. It lowers the risk of heart disease. It actually helps to manage type 2 diabetes. It protects the colon from cancer. And the absolute key thing is the overall way it improves digestion. So that goes back to the gut health. So you've got your beans, they're stored, and you're going to cook them. So the first thing you need to do with beans is to soak them. And I think you should soak them for a minimum of 12 hours because the soaking will decrease the phytates that are naturally in all seeds, also the enzyme inhibitors, and most importantly, the lectins that are in pulses. The lectins are what the seed has and the plant develops to protect itself. But they are resistant to human digestion and they can cause problems. So actually soaking them will lessen the lectins. The other thing you can do to reduce lectins is actually sprout, but I don't recommend sprouting these beans. They're one of the few things that I wouldn't sprout, along with the deadly nightshade family, but the beans I wouldn't sprout. Because you absolutely cannot eat these beans raw. They need to be cooked. But there's different ways that you can cook them to make sure that they are soft and delicious. And one of the traditional ways is when you cook your bean is to add some kombu or wakame or a piece of seaweed. And that actually helps make them more digestible. And I think that's probably the best thing I always do. But the other thing that can actually take away any of what you might call the anti-nutrients, but I don't like that word, but you know what I mean, is to cook them in a pressure cooker. And that actually helps as well. As a general rule of thumb, you should not add salt when you cook beans because that makes them tough. So you should add them afterwards. And actually, it's not a good idea to add acidic substances like lemon because it will slow the cooking down, but it does actually help them from becoming mushy. So you have to sort of weigh up what you want. So if you were going to turn them into, you know, a dip or something, it really wouldn't matter. But if you want them all single little pulses, then it does matter. But they are a fantastic food to have stored in the cupboard. And I would rather see those old ones, the old beans, saved for dried beans than, like Lynda said, quickly bunging them in the deep freeze. So I think that's all I've got to say about dried beans.
Yes, back to you, I think. Thank you all. As we said, we were going to have a canter, but I really hope that you've all managed to get something out of that and agree with us that the more you get to know your veggies, the more your life will be enriched.
Absolutely. Thank you very, very much. We've got a few questions which were popping in as we were through the presentations, which were great. I'm just I've got them here. Okay, the first question was from Jane, and it was, is there any vegetable that is not advisable to eat raw? And I'm going to pass that to you, Lynda, if you were talking about eating the beans raw.
I'm going to lob that straight over to Daphne because I eat everything raw. The one vegetable actually I wouldn't eat raw, I have no idea whether you can or you can't, would be potato, because I think that is the one vegetable that you can test better when it's cooked than
That's
raw.
very
I don't know
interesting.
what you feel, Daphne.
Well, I think potato is very interesting. It is, you know, it's a great colon cleanser, raw potato. So you might want to use it because of that. You might not. And there is a delicacy in Japan that ferments.
Quite the image I wanted to leave everybody with. We're now into the silly hour. There you go.
Fermented raw potato, which is tricky because it gets very sort of, I can't think of the word, glutinous. I wouldn't recommend it, and I recommend most things to ferment.
Yeah.
So I'm probably with you, Lynda, that it wouldn't be my ideal, you know, vegetable to chop up raw.
Yeah. But apart from that, it's got, if you just taste it, if you taste your vegetables, you don't have to eat a big bowl for raw if you don't want to. But if you want to understand a vegetable, you need to know what it tastes like, and the taste will change. When we do tomatoes, that's a classic example of how varieties really come into their own. I mean, today I was tasting in my neighbour's garden a tree spinach, which I'd never seen grow before or eaten before. And I've only had it raw so far, and it doesn't taste anything like spinach. But now I need to cook it. It's all part of informing you. That's really what it's about. But I think we both agree, yes, there is no vegetable that you can't eat raw. I think I might need to be persuaded about
Actually, I can think of another one. I don't think clove artichoke's very nice raw.
Oh, yeah. Yes, yeah, I agree. And don't eat the thistle, whatever you do.
Thank you.
Anyway, use your common sense, folks. Yes. Right, on to the next.
That's really helpful. We've got a couple of lovely comments about the recipes. So I think we need to maybe the Greek bean stew recipe. And so, Lynda, I think you and me have got a bit of work on.
Yeah, we'll send those out. Yeah.
And we'll send those out for you. So that's great. And then Daphne, the Heritage Hungarian Beans, do they have a name and are they available?
No, no, they're beautiful, aren't they? Whoever wrote that, they are absolutely. I love them. But actually, I fail miserably with its name, so I am sorry. But what they have is just a very, very beautiful story of how they were brought home by a son to the mother, and the mother grew them for 20 years before she let me have some, and I've grown them for 7 years. And they came from a market in Hungary.
Oh, lovely.
Is there actually one that you would recommend then? If I've never grown beans to dry, and you have inspired me, so is there one you'd recommend?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. You see, I just used them all, and I didn't actually show you. This is one dried one from last year. And this is the last of my jar from last year. And these were beans from my dad. And I don't know their names. So I'm hopeless at helping you there. But can you hear this?
Yeah, yeah.
That's how brittle they are from being dried. And then you just pop the bean out. There. No, but I do tell you, I do know another one, which I think is really, really beautiful. If you can get hold of pea beans, these are just completely beautiful.
Oh, yeah.
They're the double colour ones. I love those. And I didn't know where I put them this year, so I didn't plant them, but I'll plant them next year. But I'm hopeless with names, and I apologise. But mine have got lovely stories instead.
I'd like to pop in there, if I may. What is interesting, you see, if you have a French bean and you let that grow its seed, it will turn into a flageolet bean. You can buy them dried in the shops, and they are the small green ones with a very mild flavour and very creamy. I think so. I think they're one of the best, but you know, it's taste. This is your taste, my taste. I would recommend growing borlotti beans.
Oh yeah, me too.
You can buy them easily, and they will give you a reliable crop. The lovely thing about borlotti beans is actually, believe it or not, the seeds, they start off cream, and then over time they will develop that beautiful mottled appearance, which is characteristic of borlotti beans, and that's when you know they're really properly dry. You know, when they kind of take on their marbled mahogany look. And also I think, again, they're creamier than some of the other beans as well. So that is, if you were going to do one bean, I think I would go for that. But otherwise, I'm with Daphne. These are, which are, let's have a look. These are my neighbours. They're called Climbing Cobra. Now, apparently, oh no, it's not. It's these beans here. Right. Climbing, I think I've got the right one. Climbing French bean. They actually produce black seeds. So you'll then have a black bean. If you grow even one variety of your French bean, your runner bean, and your flat bean, just set aside a couple. You will get the beans that they produce, and you can then see which one you like, because each one will have a slightly different flavour.
No, that's brilliant. And yeah, it's really exciting to have your jars of beans in your larder and make a fantastic bean stew in the depths of winter as well. So we've
I've forgotten something else. You say I always forget things. The other nice thing about coming full circle from green beans to dried beans is, the other thing I did forget, which was very remiss of me, is nature is so wonderful. That classic three bean salad really works well, i.e. you have fresh green beans with dried beans. It's a brilliant combination. It just really works, and I love it because of the synergy.
Okie doke, we're doing fantastic on time. We've got 3 minutes left and probably the perfect amount of questions. So one for Daphne from Kate. Will the Return of the Larder online course be available again, or was it recorded so we can catch up with it?
So that's one for you, Jess. We recorded it.
No, this is Daphne's course, Return of the...
Oh, okay.
Return of the Larder? We did the Larder was back in fashion, or am I getting confused?
I think you're getting confused. I think it was our course.
Kate, do you mean our course? Or I know that Daphne's been doing one at Hawkwood as well, haven't you?
It's the Hawkwood one.
Oh, okay. Forgive it, yeah.
Yeah,
Over to you, Daphne.
It was recorded, is the answer to that. And I know nothing else other than that.
Okay.
So I imagine it's accessible.
Okay, Kate, I hope that helps you. I'm sure Hawkwood would better give you more. And then just to finish off, Claire we've got lots of compliments. Thank you, brilliant.
Thank you.
And Claire just says, maybe we should mention that not to save F1 beans and to buy organic and biodynamic open pollinated.
Of course.
Yes. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Claire, for raising that. Absolutely.
So I think we've probably got our brains full of beans. I know I have, certainly, and I've been very inspired. And I'm just going to reiterate that this is the first in the Cook's Garden series, and we've got 2 dates booked already. August the 27th, and we've got Tasty Tomatoes, 7:30 to 8:30, and September the 30th, we've got Earthy Potatoes. So we're doing one a month, and we really hope we could see you again. And of course, if you've got any suggestions of props you'd like or webinars, then do email us in the club. And we've got some other webinars going on as well, and lots of events and things. So joy to see you all, and I think I've done a near perfect recording, so I'm really happy. And we'll release it onto the resource library. Oh, we've got one more question from Jane.
Yes, please. How do I stop the sparrows eating my runner bean flowers?
Oh.
I
didn't know that. I didn't know they did, but why don't you try in my neighbour's garden? You know what I saw he got? He got CDs.
Yeah,
I use CDs.
You tried that one?
Yeah, and I grow all sorts of different beans. So this year I've done white flowered runner beans, because apparently they don't eat the white flowers. And they were Moonlight, but they really haven't done terribly well. I got a runner bean called Brecon Black, which has purple flowers.
Oh, interesting.
Nice.
And then I did quite a few heritage climbing beans. I can't remember which. Trail of Tears was one of them, but that's got red flowers and they're just all gone. But yeah.
Interesting.
And maybe I should just stop feeding the blooming sparrows and they'll all go to someone else's garden.
Do you feed birds?
Yeah.
Well, it's a point. What I do know, I don't feed birds. I just let everything seed. I have tons of birds in my garden and I've never ever fed them, as it happens. But I was talking to somebody about this recently, and apparently once you start feeding them, yes, they kind of become addicted, so they will always come to your garden, and then you have to keep feeding them. So a bit harsh, but maybe if you didn't feed them, they might go somewhere else.
I do enjoy watching them, though. Maybe
have you got
a trade-off always, isn't it? It's a trade-off.
It is a trade-off.
Yeah. I always think there's enough in the garden to share.
I've got 2 flocks. I've got one in the front and one in the back. So I might carry on feeding the flock in the front and stop feeding the flock.
Yeah, but they might pop round for their pudding, mightn't they, to the other side?
They might, and if I stop feeding them now, they will be hungry and just diving into every flower that comes. So
yeah, but this is fascinating. I've got sparrows in my garden, but maybe it's the quantity, because I've kind of got a couple of sparrows or something. They as yet have never gone. So how many have you got? Do you know?
I don't know, 25, something like that. A lot.
There you go. You do know. You know what this is? This is the old kind of monocropping, isn't it? In other words, you're fertilizing your sparrows and now they've become a pest. Stop fertilizing your sparrows and who knows, nature might return to its natural balance.
Can I say something? I had problems with my apple blossoms. They were eaten by the sparrows. And I ended up netting the apple tree until the flowers had gone and they came into fruit. That helped.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you.
So maybe I need to net my beans. No, I'm not going to go that far.
Interesting dilemmas. Okay, everybody. I don't know about you. I'm pretty overheated. So if there's overcooked, we're cooked. So thank you once again. Thank
you very much for coming. Thank you.
Lynda and Daphne, I love your wisdom. And see you all soon.
See you soon.
Bye, guys.
Bye. Bye.
Bye.